Welcome to Thinkin, a podcast series by Kautilya School of Public Policy.
Good morning, everyone. Today we have with us Lieutenant General Sanjiv Langer, retired. Lieutenant General Sanjiv Langer, retired, PVSM AVSM, is a distinguished military veteran with a span of 39 years, where he held several operational and logistical appointments. During his work, he dealt with strategic and operational issues with the Ministry of Defense, Ministry of Home Affairs, and Ministry of External Affairs. Sanjiv Langer was the first Indian to be selected to serve at the UN headquarters as an international civil servant under the Department of Peacekeeping for Africa region. He also commanded an operational infantry division and strike corps during his tenure. Later, he was appointed as the Director General, Defense Intelligence and Deputy Chief Integrated Defense Staff. And Mr. Langer was also a former member of Armed Forces Tribunal. It's good to have you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
And today, Mr. Langer is here with us to talk about basically security issues. And over to you, Shum.
So, sir, as India celebrates its 75th year of independence, how do you see the growth of India from the defense point of view? What are some of the areas in defense which India has fared well and where it needs to improve?
I think if you look at the trajectory that the armed forces have followed since independence, we had a very, very troubled and nascent beginning because there was a division of the assets between the two nations, that is Pakistan and India, that became independent. And almost simultaneous to becoming independent, we were plunged into a war. Starting from those beginnings, the armed forces support and the defense structures, as well as the industry which supports the armed forces, have all grown exponentially. And we've been through various phases where we had to meet several challenges, external as well as internal. And all these have contributed to the holistic and the rounded growth of the armed forces and defense public sector undertakings. There is a whole host of other, shall I say, industries and offices connected with the security of the country, which have really grown in a very comprehensive manner. What we need to keep striving to do is to indigenize so that we become completely self-sufficient in the defense capabilities, which are so integral to the nature in which armed forces function in a challenged domain that we are. No nation can depend on external sources of weapons, equipment, intellect, or now in the domain of C4ISR, which is command, control, computers, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. All this has to be produced by yourselves. And in all the services, this is a utmost priority, self-sufficiency, to really, shall I say, realize your full potential. In addition to that, modernization, change, and adapting to new challenges is a constant challenge. But that I would like to say that we are reasonably well off in that domain, because all the three armed forces have very competent general staff, and we have central planning under the CDS now, as well as central general staffs integrated with the ministries, and that has really held us in good stead.
So one of the challenges you talked about, and we were talking before also, is that what General Rawat, late General Rawat, has talked about, the 2.5 front war basically, but the two front there is the China-Pakistan nexus. So how do you suggest, as a military point of view, how do you suggest we tackle that? Because we are seeing more and more integration between their strategic thinking. So what is the way forward for Indian Army?
You know, your observation is correct, but I would like to just go back a little bit into from the time that we became independent. This aspect of having to deal with two challenges is not new. We are quite cognizant of the fact that we had to deal with two challenges. And you would all remember that we had an early war, 47-48, then you had 1962, aggression on your northern borders, you had 1965, following on its heels by Pakistan, because they perceived that after whatever transpired in 62, Indian polity and armed forces would not be in a position to resist an attempt by them at J&K. All that was proved wrong. So the fact that we have had to deal with two challengers on our borders is not new. It's been known. And over the years, at different rates and at different paces, we have tried to cater for this challenge. But you will also realize that we are not a nation which seeks aggression or war. The centerpiece of our nationality centers on the fact that we want the benefits of progress to go to our citizens, and we want to peacefully develop internally without being interfered with externally. That's why we are a non-aggressive entity. So this has progressed at its own pace. You have seen a certain amount of sharpening in the attitude of China towards the unresolved boundary issue, and Pakistan will take any opportunity to embarrass you. So I don't think the mechanisms of the state, the instruments of the state and the armed forces are in any state of ambiguity of the kind of threats that could emerge. Right? And it's important that, like you have asked me this question, that citizens are aware of this fact, that everything possible is done to ensure in various domains, be it diplomatic, be it military, be it economic, that you do not fall into a circumstances where you precipitate aggressive actions on both sides. But no one controls anyone, and we are alive to these threats, and we are fully prepared to defend our integrity irrespective of the cost and the consequences.
So since you spoke about China, so how can we modernize our forces since China is way ahead of us?
I would not go with your premise completely. Firstly, China being way ahead of us, a lot of it is a smokescreen, and a lot of it, when you analyze and you go into the details of how they presume that they are ahead of us, they don't come back with very positive conclusions. For example, Chinese equipment, at least with the land forces, has been pushed out to various countries, and a lot of countries are highly disappointed with what they put out, all right, because it does not match up to the kind of criteria that they say it will match up to. So I'm not so enthusiastic about all the modernizations which China talks about. It talks about itself. Second is, the Chinese army, People's Liberation Army, is a largely untested army. They have not seen any active conflict except minor border incursions after the Korean War, right? And that is very different to the Indian armed forces, which at time again have had to tackle all kinds of threat, right? And what stays in your memory is the Kargil War. And apart from that, there has been engagement of the army in all spectrum of low intensity conflict. So that makes it, that it creates a different DNA in your armed forces, which the Chinese lack, right? The third is, they talk a lot about informatization, satellites, and controls. They are definitely ahead of us in those domains. We can't deny that. They're definitely ahead of us in economy and ability to put money into defense production and stuff like that. But at the fighting edge, where the man and the weapon and the way it is employed matters, I would not go by this paradigm that they are greatly superior. Right. On the other hand, of course, we have to modernize. Modernization is a constant struggle, especially in a world which is constantly changing. Especially in a world where you started the ICT revolution some time ago in the 90s, but as I always say, it's not a revolution. It's moving rapidly all the time and changing the goalposts as we talk. So modernization is a huge challenge. We are trying to keep pace as fast as we can. It's an expensive proposition, okay? But the lack of perception that we are fully modernized doesn't necessarily translate into a differential in combat application or power which the Chinese would want you to believe.
So, sir, is Agnipath scheme a right step in transforming the defense sector? What are your views on it?
Quite honestly, Agnipath is, in my opinion, past the stage of views. It is a scheme which has been accepted by the three chiefs, and it is a scheme which has been implemented. And now already the first lot of recruits under this scheme have been recruited and are being trained. Now it is not a question of seeing, as far as the armed forces are concerned, whether it was good or not. Because once the chiefs have signed off and agreed, and I, as a veteran, as a soldier, have no voice, right? The point of the matter is now we have to see how this scheme plays out, what will be its advantages and disadvantages, what will be its ramifications, which the armed forces are highly competent to deal with. And I'm sure whatever the pluses and minuses of this emerge, they will be dealt with in a comprehensive manner, both by the armed forces and the government.
So there is a palpable anger in some of our neighbors regarding the Agnipath. So there is an issue that the Gurkhas have raised regarding that this was just too fast and they were not informed. Yeah. So do you think that this could have any possible adverse impact on our relations with Nepal?
Well, actually, the Nepalese government maintained that they would only take a view on this once the re-election was done and a new government was put in place. That has happened, right? And now I am sure they will come to some conclusion. But let me say that we have a very long-standing relationship with Nepal. We have a very unique relationship with Nepal, unlike any other two countries. Nepalese can come into India, live here, work here, and be treated equal to citizens of the country. And we've got a huge population living here, and they have assimilated beautifully. So I do not feel that this is going to be, if dealt with in maturity, which I'm sure it will because the new government has come in place, I don't think it's going to be an issue which is really going to stumble relations between our two nations, because the relationships are very deep and very comprehensive. And that is something we tend to ignore. We keep comparing relations with China and relations with other nations. It is incomparable. The relationship that Nepal has with India, I'm not talking about socio-culture. Socio-culture in any case is very strong and almost, in some cases very, very similar. I'm not talking about that. I am talking about the formal arrangements between the two states are so endearing to each other, are so engaging to each other, it's difficult to find a parallel anywhere else. So I understand completely that the Nepalese government at that point of time was unable to apply their mind to it because they were in the throes of selecting a new government. Now that that has happened, I do not feel that this would turn out to be a major issue because there is so much commonality of approach, and I am confident it will be resolved. Gorkhas have been integral part of the Indian Army. They have fought in all wars very, very courageously and meritoriously. There is a huge ex-serviceman population in Nepal, which is dependent on us for their pensions, but apart from that is emotionally, culturally, deeply linked with with the Indian Army, I don't think these things will evaporate just like that.
So coming a bit about yourself, like we are looking information about you on the online. There wasn't much available. So if you can share some of your experiences.
Well, you have to be specific because retired soldiers are not supposed to speak. We've done our service to the nation and that's it.
Yeah. Maybe
Yeah.
you can share some insights like how is a day in the life of an army officer?
Yeah. Well, let me start by saying that I had no doubt in my mind as a child that I only wanted to be an officer. And the reasons were three. I wanted to live in the outdoors. I wanted to train for combat and go into combat. And the third thing is I didn't want to study. But the third one, a miserable failure. The amount you have to study in the armed forces is unbelievable, and it is correct, given the complexity of war and given the complexity of the technology that goes with war. So there is no, shall I say, there is no hiccup on that count. It had to be done. It's a tough life. It's a great life. It's a balanced life. It's a life which is unique. You get the responsibility of commanding men, which is unparalleled in any profession or in any form of life. They are your responsibility to look after. They are your responsibility to integrate, and they are your responsibility to take into conflict and war. It is a supreme responsibility which is put on you when human beings are given to you in that manner. So I feel my journey or any person's journey as an officer is a very privileged journey. You're in that privileged position. As you all know, nobody joins the armed forces to be financially rich. That's not going to happen, but it doesn't matter. The kind of respect, the kind of love, the kind of recognition that you get is more than a compensation for anything. And that is what I've enjoyed all these years, while giving back as much energy and as much intellect and everything to what the job required. Army is a family, and it's a very closely knit family, and we all look out for each other. We've got each other's back, and our wives and children are completely integrated. I could not have chosen anything better for my life.
So there's a great sense of brotherhood in the army, as you
Yeah.
mentioned. So, but sometimes in media, some reports come like there has been some sort of caste or religious-based discrimination in the army. So, is it just a narrative built by the media, or like to what extent this is true?
I would not like to comment on media, because media is a very strange animal, if I may use the word, and not be pilloried for using that word. But I don't think they have an idea of what the armed forces are. There is no concept of caste. There is no concept of any segregation. These are alien concepts to the armed forces, right? I know it's very easy for people to pick out that, these are high caste troops and low caste troops. Nobody thinks like that, right? And the majority now of regiments and units in the army are all India, all caste. You have everyone from every part of the world, all religions, all cultures, all food habits, everything integrated, all kinds of music, all kinds of languages, all integrated. The central driving force of the armed forces is none of these. The central driving force of the armed forces is its mission to defend the country and to do whatever necessary to defend the country. And when called to in internal disorder, to apply its muscle and its brain to resolving the internal disorder. That is central to the thought process. All media can say what they want. They are doing their own business. I don't want to comment on them. All right. But they are quite far from the reality that actually lives, thrives, and drives the energy of the armed forces.
Sharing about your experiences, we know that you have also served for a very long period in Kashmir area, And since the decision in 2019 when the Article 370 was repealed, we have seen the situation has evolved a lot. So as a military veteran, how do you view that situation? Are there any chances that the situation could go worse in future, or you think there will be stability in upcoming time in Kashmir?
Okay. So, when Kashmir has been a difficult issue over history for various reasons, which, are possibly well known to everyone. But when it exploded in 89-90, as a result of the direct intervention of Pakistan in what was called Op-Topac, where they pushed people across to inflame the population with jihad, that was an awful situation. And I think the people who suffered most were the citizens of Jammu and Kashmir, because they had to stomach all this violence and all this infected ideas which came across the border, and then had to go through the pain of countering it, which we did. I don't think anything is comparable to that period. I think from that period, it's been a very, very steady upward swing in the security situation. Politics is the domain of politicians, and it is the will of people, and they are completely free to do what they like in that domain based on the will of the people. There was a lot of apprehension that when this issue on Article 370 will be announced, and Kashmir will be up in flames, and there will be a lot of discontent and unrest. It hasn't happened. The reality of it is that is not the case. One has to go by empirical evidence and not what people perceive and feel. The empirical evidence is that is not the case. So if that is not the case, obviously there are political and socio-cultural elements that are at work to come to terms with the reality that it is as of now. Presently, I don't see any indication of anything spinning out of control. It does not happen to have the ingredients right now for a variety of reasons. One is that the chief protagonist, which was Pakistan in the case of Op-Topac, is now exceedingly careful and is exceedingly, shall I say, thoughtful about trying to precipitate anything across the border, right? That doesn't mean that he'll not do it. If he gets an opportunity, sees your weakness, he'd love to do it. But it does not see that opportunity to my mind right now. And therefore that's not likely to happen. And which is the best thing possible, because the people of J&K must decide for themselves what is best for themselves and come to terms with the reality. I think that's the best thing possible.
And to add on to Vinay's question, how do you see the civil-military relations in Kashmir and in northeast areas like where APSPA was implemented?
So if you're talking about the civil-military relations between the structures involved, that is the organs of the government, there's never been a problem. The civil-military relations between the organs of the government in crisis areas work very well, right? And there is perfect understanding, there are rules of engagements, there are very standard procedures which exist between the civil authority and the armed forces, and these have been tested in many circumstances since independence over time. So that is, especially in crisis, there is full cooperation. There is never any problem. How the civilian population views us, that is I would say, that is an area of shifting goalposts. Quite naturally, when the armed forces go into a difficult situation, the population is what is already affected by the militants or the insurgents. And we have to go into the base and pull out these people who are detractors and defectors against the state, Union of India. Well, it is painful for the population. And the armed forces are in a very, very difficult situation to make sure that they don't upset and damage the innocent civilian population while looking for the insurgent or the terrorist. but it's a very difficult task. And perceptions of the armed forces will of course vary. My personal experience is that during the intensity of operations, there is a lot of rancor and there is a lot of pain caused to the civil populace, and it is natural that they feel in a particular way. But once that passes, I get the distinct impression that they are able to logicalize and get to the conclusion that this was possibly necessary for these people to operate in this way. The hatred which is talked about and the resentment which is talked about, I don't think that persists because the Indian Armed Forces operate in a very clean way. They go in, try and resolve the problem, and they are not keen to hang on. They want to get back to their task. So people see that, the population sees that. And you will see in the Northeast, over a period of time, we have now come to a stage where there are ceasefires with all the insurgent groups, most of them, except for a few. And people are reaping the benefit of peace and progress, you know. And I'm confident that is what will finally emerge even in J&K, right, where it has not already happened.
So we are very sorry that we will have to end our conversation here,
No problem.
since we are running out of time.
Yeah.
So it was a very wonderful conversation where Lieutenant General threw a lot of light on the state of security in India, and I'm hope that his insights will be very valuable to our viewers. So thank you for watching, and we will see you
Thank you
next
very
time.
much. Thank you.
Thank you so much.